The biggest single benefit you can give yourself and all around you is never, ever panic. The worst thing I think that destroys people, eats their soul away, is boredom. They get bored, and that's deadly. You're going to spend a huge amount of your time working at whatever it is you do, and you need to get some joy out of it. And if you're not getting joy out of it, you need to think about doing something else.
Sharp strategies, sweet success.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. You're listening to Sharp Strategies, Sweet Success. I am your host, Tiffany Swedensky, and today we're talking to Brewster Rawls of Rawls Law Group in Richmond, Virginia. I actually knew Brewster long before he knew me because I got on LinkedIn a couple years back and saw he was basically already a celebrity there. And I followed him for a couple years, and then Rawls Law Group reached out to me, and I'm actually working with them as their fractional CMO. And so it's been a real pleasure getting to know Brewster and the Rawls Law Group team. They do essentially 100% medical malpractice, some nursing home abuse now as we're spinning up. And it's quite a bit different from car accident and general personal injury. So I've learned a lot in the process. But thanks so much for Brewster for being on the show. And Brewster, if you don't mind, tell the listeners a little bit about yourself.
Well, I've been practicing law for a good while at this point, actually since Reagan was president. We don't get to need specifics here. Most of it was as a defense lawyer, surprisingly, until the last 8-9 years. I've switched over to full-time plaintiff. But before that, I've been doing federal tort claims against the government all over the country since the late 90s. So one of the things I would say is a funny thing. I went to law school thinking I wanted to be a real estate lawyer. I would have been a terrible real estate lawyer. I couldn't proofread then. I still can't proofread now. And that's what being a real estate lawyer is about. I stumbled into being a trial lawyer and stumbled into doing malpractice, and forever grateful for it because even now I'm still having fun doing it. In fact, I'm probably having more fun as a lawyer now than I've ever had as a lawyer. So I think that says something. It's lawyers, law firms, but the actual practice of law, cases, clients, I've loved it from day one and I still do.
So when did you decide medical malpractice was going to be your focus? And how did you start up Rawls Law Group?
I started out at a small insurance defense firm in Southwest Virginia, in Abingdon. Thought I had been exiled to the end of the earth because that was the only job I got coming out of law school. The reality is it was, fortuitous because they were great lawyers. And in 2.5 years, they taught me how to practice law. I tried 20 jury trials. The aggregate value of those cases was probably not $100,000, but they were my cases, and I tried them and did lots of stuff and worked with some just exceptionally good lawyers. Of course, better being the enemy of good, I got a job offer to come to work for a big firm in Richmond, McGuire Woods. I went there. I was concerned that I wasn't smart enough to work at that firm. As I tell people, I was over that by lunchtime. That, I was not cut out that. And after 1.5 years, I went to what was then sort of one of the premier insurance defense firms in Richmond, hired as a young malpractice lawyer. Unfortunately, I joined the group just in time for it to go bankrupt and bounced around with pieces and parts of that. And I ended up at a general practice firm, and my practice was growing. The defense practice was growing exponentially. And even though I was a named partner, I managed to get myself fired. So in the October 1 of 1996, having had about 6 weeks notice, Rawls Law Group opened up for business. And we started out with me and 3 other lawyers and staff, and we had cases and all that. But basically the origin of this firm was me getting fired. And it's kind of progressed on since then. The defense practice got big. At one point, we were 18 lawyers and 4 offices throughout Virginia. All of that sort of imploded in 2016 and 17. And I ended up being purely a plaintiff's lawyer at that point. I would not recommend that as a business model for starting a plaintiff's practice. It took me some time to get through the debt and the overhead and residue of a much bigger practice, but that's kind of the basic origin of it. And that's the short play history of it.
It's so funny how many entrepreneur origin stories are closely related to getting fired or just being unhappy with the current working conditions. And so you strike out, start something new or start something of your own. That's funny, but at the same time, it's the same thing that so many entrepreneurs say, when they talk about how they got started.
It forces you to make a decision. And it's interesting, probably 5 years before when I was at the firm going bankrupt, they fired me too. But I was unfired about 2 weeks later. Long story, not very interesting. But in that period of time, I sat there and said, well, if I've got to go out, and I thought I might have some work, and in fact I did, which is the reason I was unfired, I started planning, I have to go out on my own. What do I need to do? So that was kind of there in my mind through the ups and downs of the next few years. So in one sense, when it all hit the fan with my former colleagues, I was ready for it. And at that point, it was like, screw it. I'm not going to try to find a home. I'm just going to take what I have. I've got enough, and we'll just forge out on our own. And it's not to say it's always been easy, but a moment like that, as unpleasant as it is, forces you to make a decision and to do what you really needed to do anyway. So in one sense, as bitter and ugly as that all was, I should probably sit and drink a toast to those guys at least once a week.
Bad workplaces have a habit of forcing you into, or like you said, forcing you to make a decision.
They force your hand. Yeah, they force your hand. It's been interesting. I'm coming now on 30 years as a business owner. I will say one thing, and it's probably true of any business. The motto should always be, there's always something. And sometimes that something is big and sometimes it's minor, but I've had impaired partners. I've had people steal from me, you name it. I mean, at some point it's happened. And the good thing about being my age now is you also sort of realize that, the sun's still going to come up in the east tomorrow morning, and we'll go on.
Well, that's really refreshing to hear as somebody who's only been running their own business for, I have to do math, 4 years, something like that, 3.5. Every time you come up against an issue, it's really scary because it's like the first time I've ever had to deal with that. And you don't know what you don't know. And I'm a very anxious person. So I seek out help. And then I'll talk to a business owner who's been at it for a while and they're just like, chill out, basically. Because, that kind of thing happens.
Sometimes you deal with stuff that is, in fact, really bad. Yeah. Idiots. But, you just, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? I mean, that's kind of how you sort of look at it. And what I've always found in almost anything, whether it's the practice of law or running a business, that the biggest single benefit you can give yourself and all around you is never, ever panic. So it's taken me many years to figure out to stay calm and not get mad, but you just keeping your wits about you. And that's always in my mind been the mark of a really good lawyer, is that you're in some case, you're trying it, and everything is just going down the toilet. It's bad. It's bad. And just being able to stand in there in that courtroom and keep going and try to figure out what angles you can and to try to, and that's the mark of a good lawyer. It's like when it all hits the fan, how does he or she handle it? I've seen lawyers do well, and then I've seen lawyers go to pieces. They just turn into, in the words of one of my former colleagues, a puddle of shit. So I've seen, but that's the mark. And I think it's true in owning a business too. It's just to keep your wits about you and figure out what you need to do the best you can. And if nothing else, just lessen the damage and keep it from being worse.
I think that's why stress management is so important for business owners, entrepreneurs, and just everyone in general. I mean, I could go down the list because I've known people personally and professionally who just simply overreact to things. And I cannot recall a time where, that overreaction was useful. Usually it was the opposite. And it's so funny because when you're working with somebody who's like that, who's very reactive, it can be really difficult to convince them they're not being useful. They're actually being a problem. They're creating a problem in the environment and the culture. That's something I've definitely learned in the last year or 2 years. There's things that come up all the time with family, with clients, with business. Decisions have to be made. And you have to be able to manage your stress. Because like you said, the sun still rises in the east. I had to think about it for a second so I didn't get it wrong.
Going up in the west, you got a problem.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. That's when there's an emergency happening. And yeah, it's so when you can take the time to work on how you react and how you deal with stress, you'll find so many things in your life just improve. So I think that's a really great lesson.
Yeah, and I will tell you, I'll be 71 on my next birthday. And one of the advantages of being this age is that I I don't know. It's probably an overstatement to say you get wiser. I don't know that I'm all that wiser, but you do get perspective and you do tend to be calmer about things. When I was 40, there people could tell some tales about me and they're probably true. I was awful in some regards. No one will ever accuse me for lacking ego. Frankly, kind of going back to the story of being fired, in one sense, I was an asshole. And they were too, but I can't really say that I was totally innocent in all of that because I had no patience. I didn't suffer fools. And not to say that I suffer fools now, but I have a lot more perspective on it.
Just to ask, this is one of the questions I wanted to ask you. But so you started the firm back in 1996, right? What did you do to market back then? What was it like in the late 90s, I guess?
Well, interesting. It was in the, it was a defense firm. So the marketing was all sort of me knowing adjusters and having relationships with adjusters. And that is a world that is, it's an odd, very closed little world. And what makes one adjuster like you versus another, not at all germane to what I do now, and probably what most of your clients are in that position. When we started the FTCA practice in 1999, we did market it. And we started out then, as you might expect in 1999, with print ads. And we were running print ads in the VFW, the Veterans of Foreign War magazine, which was ridiculously expensive. It was $10,000 a month in $1999. It was ridiculously expensive. We tried ads in other publications. VFW always worked pretty well, and it was kind of a trial and error, hit or miss. I remember one time we had some sort of military history publication, and we bought a quarter-page ad in there for several $1,000s. I don't remember how much. And when the magazine came out and they sent us our courtesy copy, our ad was right beside one for marching songs of the Waffen SS. Not good. Or what you find in some of these magazines that had classified ads that attorneys falls right below Asian women.
Oh.
Yeah. We did experiment once with a billboard and it was really pretty cool. It had VA medical error on a camouflage background and then our 877 vet for vet number. Pretty cool. And we put it outside 2 VA hospitals in Florida that had, let's just say they fed us a lot of work. The problem is that the billboard went up on, I think, September 13th, 2001. Not exactly a good time to be picking on government healthcare and the VA. And we got a lot of calls out of it. We did. Almost all of them just cranks, people telling us we were unpatriotic, accused to be terrorist, whatever. We're thoroughly un-American. So that was our great billboard experiment, which was also not cheap. But what always fascinated me in those early days is what works, what didn't work, and why it worked and why it didn't work. And as we entered into we obviously don't do print ads anymore. We entered into the world of internet marketing. That's been, just as fascinating to me because, what works, what doesn't work, it's just sort of shocking to me. But really, and partly for our state law cases, and also indeed for our federal tort claims cases, at this point, a huge part of that is referral work too. So it's built up over time. We have a reputation. In the FTCA world, we're one of only 2 firms that does it nationally, and the other one only takes big cases. They don't want the little ones. And we'll take smaller cases. We'll do that. Sometimes we'll get a case where the net to the client is less than 100,000, and that can be life-changing for people. We've figured out how to do that efficiently, and we've done those all over the country. We've probably, I've been admitted pro hoc vice at this point in, I think, 35 different districts, more than once in a bunch of them. And we have probably had tort claims we have filed, if not in every state in the country, I would say 48, 49, that we have actually filed a tort claim for somebody in at some point. So that's, but the marketing part of it fascinates me. It just does, as to what works and what doesn't work. And I don't pretend to understand it. And people like you, no offense, Tiffany, throw jargon at us. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Just, I want to know about new files when we're signing up. I don't care about qualified leads. I don't care about conversions. I care about new files, new clients, but it's still just what works and what doesn't. It just I find it just incredibly interesting.
That's what I really like about marketing because it's like, I was going to say a science experiment, but I think to be more specific, like a sociological experiment.
It is.
Because
Totally.
you do something over here, you see what results might be produced over here. We do tend to get loose with the jargon. I mean,
We all do.
my favorite right now is
Lawyers
just,
do too, you know. So.
yeah. I mean, nobody can quite coalesce around the terminology for AI search optimization. I've heard it called like 6 different things at this point, so it's a little bit funny.
AI is a topic in and of itself, which is just pretty astounding. You know.
And a lot of developments. I mean, the thing that I don't know if you have too much to say about it, but just what I was reading about a lot this week. But like what you type into Chat GPT can be used like against you. Like it's discoverable, I guess. I don't know too much about the legal jargon. So if you take, the information that your lawyer gives you and put it into Chat GPT and ask it to break it down into simple terms, now the other side can basically get that
We
documentation.
haven't confronted that yet, but it's totally plausible. If the client sits there and asks Chat GPT, do I have a good case? I think just like social media, that's potentially discoverable. And that's a scary thought. I mean, social media itself is scary enough in terms of what clients say and do and put up there. But that, I think, is something that people need to be warned about. And we have had a couple of instances so far. We're dealing with clients, and they're clearly sending us AI-generated letters. I wrote one back and said, look, either you're a lawyer and you haven't told us, or you're getting advice from another lawyer, and if that's the case, then maybe you ought to have that lawyer represent you, or you're getting all of this from AI. And if it's the last point, AI, it's not making any sense. And then, interestingly, the client didn't admit it, but all of a sudden got very reasonable.
It is very interesting because it's a good source of information and it has its utility, but also it's often wrong on some things are critically important. And so I see it coming up a lot, and something, I forget who mentioned it to me, but potential clients could be uploading your fee agreement to ChatGPT and asking it to break down what's in your fee agreement and potentially what's happening there marketing wise that may be holding back people from signing. And I've been thinking about that as well. So it's interesting the implication of it all. And
I have found so far, we have a program we use, and it is very handy because I could go into it and say, tell me what the lab values were between X date and Y date. And 30 seconds later, I have it. The broader analytic elements of it, I'm not as enamored of, but the simply being able to dig out facts that I know to look for, that I'm looking for my reasons, because I've done this a long time, that's remarkable. That's just nothing short.
One of the ways I'm using AI more and more is the AI note taker. And at this point, I have it integrated with my marketing Google Drive folder. So it has access to that, my project management board. And so if I need to know something, I can ask it, what did we do on this date or what happened here? And it can tell me exactly what's going on. I just really cuts the time out of discovering what's happening in the marketing department, who's doing what. It's kind of incredible.
Here's what I'm finding I'm doing it. It's using it sort of like the file. I was looking at something the other day and I wanted to say, well, what is the date of the defendant's expert designation? I could have gone and found a pretrial scheduling order, looked at, but I just asked Eve and, bang, there it is, April 21st.
Oh, so you're using Eve. I previewed that, I think, at 2 different events that I went to just this year, and it was really cool.
It's sort of jaw-dropping. And particularly, you're talking to somebody here that when I started practicing law, fax machines were cutting-edge technology. My first firm in Abingdon, we didn't have a fax machine. It was the telephone, and it was mail. There was no fax. And when I got to McGuire Woods, we had 6 fax machines because none of them talked to each other. So you had to have 6 different versions of them, because only one model would talk to another. What I've seen in 42 years is pretty shocking.
A lot of changes in communication, in my lifetime. When I was born, it was basically pre-internet. I mean, not technically, but pre-commercialization of it for sure. And all these advances, it's just so incredible. But just to turn this to the topic I definitely wanted to talk with you about. But what's interesting is, we're seeing a lot of these AI tools. And then on the other end of it, we're hearing from business coaches that what really matters is you and how you use these tools. And, with digital marketing, the CPA is getting so high that we, pivot and turn back to referral marketing, which you do really, really well on LinkedIn. Could you tell everyone a little bit about how you got started on LinkedIn, when you got started? You were like way early to the game. And I just think that's so interesting.
When the defense practice disintegrated in 2000, by late 17, we were out of it, basically early 18. Probably about a year later, I was thinking of things to do to try to market to the firm. And I never really looked at LinkedIn very much. So I started putting up things occasionally. And then during COVID, when that hit, about then, I decided, well, this makes sense. I'm going to try to post every day. Okay. First, it was all serious law-related stuff to some degree. But, after a while, it sort of evolved into, I'd put my dog on there a lot. In fact, she's sitting here. I'm remarkable that she's not barking at us right now. Put my dog on there, and I would talk, about other things. And it's been kind of amazing. It took a little while, but then it just sort of has taken off. And, does it get work? I mean, the answer to that is yes. I mean, I think I can look at what I would call soft referrals, which are people who call us up and say, somebody told us about it, but it's not like John Smith, the lawyer, calling up and saying, I've got this client for you. Once I've got very active in it, that has continued to increase and go up fairly remarkably from what was a very small number to probably, I think at this point, 30 or 40% of our contacts. I have to attribute that to LinkedIn. Interestingly, however, it doesn't necessarily translate into a huge number of new files always. I mean, so whether the effort is cost effective or not, it's very hard to measure, because what you don't know is, when somebody calls us up with a referral, is it because they saw my post the day before and says, yeah, we'll call Rawls in Richmond. And it may be somebody I knew otherwise, but they look at it. It does get a remarkable reach. And one of the things that's quite entertaining to me is that I am stalked fairly uniformly by the defense bar, who follow me, although many don't admit it. In fact, as one of them I ran into once, a young lawyer, asked, how's Maggie, my dog? And I said, oh, you must follow me on LinkedIn. Oh, I never look at it. It's like, well, if you never look at it, how do you know about my dog? But it's kind of funny like that. And, but I know it gets some chatter. And honestly, at this point, it's kind of the point, it's kind of a fun effort. It is a little bit intimidating at first to thinking about putting content out every day. I probably post 6-7 times a week, actually. Some days get twice. Usually not on Sunday, but some days I'll throw in an extra one or two in the evening, or something just strikes me as interesting. I'll put it out there. But once you get used to it, it's really not that hard to do, and I could bat these things out pretty quick. Sometimes when I go back and look at them later, they look like they were batted out pretty quick. Some of them are more intelligent than others, but it's actually kind of a fun effort. And I've ended up meeting a bunch of people. Some of them, I've actually connected with when I've gone to towns where they were, or they've come to Richmond. And it's just been a great way to connect with other lawyers. And I've actually had a good time. I've had fun doing it.
You essentially mastered dark social, which is what terminology that we use for it, because I know this is true among attorneys, and it might be true among just broader professionals who are busy. But a lot of people on LinkedIn don't engage. They might never, like or comment on a post, but they go and they scroll through the feed. And, there are little tells that people pay more attention than you think they do. And, sometimes you'll post something and nobody engages with it, but then like 16, 20,000, reach or impressions or whatever. And so, they've looked at it. It's interesting. Do you keep up with like your post metrics? Is that something like you keep a close thumb on, or do you look at them at all?
I do. And I mean, I'd be a liar to you if I said it doesn't bother me when I have one that's a dud. I have no understanding whatsoever after doing this for 6 years or so, how the algorithm works, what it likes and doesn't like. I'm clueless. I truly don't know. You'll have stuff you don't think will get any traction, but it does. And then I'll have some carefully crafted, I think, brilliant post and nothing, but I do look at it. And it's interesting. I had a guy come to me about 8 months ago and said, I can boost your engagements. I can boost all this. And it was a very expensive service. So I said, I'm not interested. He says, well, let me do 3 or 4 posts for you and see. And I got for free. And that's fine. Let's do that. And in the world of AI, I talked to the guy for about a half an hour, and he put together 3 or 4 posts out of that, which were plainly sort of AI generated. His AI program plainly knew how to imitate my voice, how I write, and did a pretty good job of it. It actually fooled one of my oldest friends. I mean, it had fooled him, who's highly anti-AI. Called it one of my most brilliant posts ever. And
Oh no.
and it's interesting, they got better engagement than the other ones, but not that much better, not enough to justify the price. But even then, it was like, I do think, I'm dead serious, that I think the LinkedIn algorithm is ageist. I think because of my age, that is a negative factor. I absolutely believe that. Can I prove it? No, I have no proof whatsoever, but I absolutely believe that. But having said that, it is interesting what the engagement you get and what people look at. And I'd say probably about 40% of what I put on LinkedIn is fairly specific, serious lawyer type stuff, talking about what I do. About 40% is probably kind of generic lawyer life type stuff. And about 20% is just basically fluff. I mean, it's my dog. It's, what I cook for dinner on Sunday night, whatever. I mean, that kind of stuff.
What's interesting is those are the posts that I see are the pictures of your grandkids, of your weekends, of food, of Maggie. I guess, like, come to think of it, I don't really see like your lawyer post, but I think that's part of, I guess, the algorithm with LinkedIn now. Like the people who you're talking to are more likely going to see it, and I'm a marketer, so I don't typically see like a lot of posts about the law unless it's just somebody I follow really closely. Well, since you've been using LinkedIn for so long, so consistently, I did have a question. Like, have you ever noticed like an algorithm shift? Have you just noticed like a hard date where all of a sudden your post started performing totally different or not as well? Has anything like that happened to you?
Several times. I mean, one of the things that was happening about a year ago is you'd put some post out, it'd get maybe 5,000 or 6,000 engagements, which is kind of okay. And then all of a sudden, a day later, it would just start getting engagements, bam. And at day 5, you'd be looking at 30 or 40,000. That ran for a period of time, and I had no idea. It wasn't getting a significantly higher number of reactions, but it was getting a lot more impressions. I have seen some other ones. I'm also half convinced that if you have like a week where you run and you have like 3 or 4 really good posts, it shunts you to the back, and then you get a couple there that are just totally flat. But after the fact, looking at things was definitely, that was one that's clearly an algorithm issue. I have no idea what drove it. It just, that's like sticks out in my mind. I will say that around the election in 24, anything that had even sort of a slight, I stay away from political stuff largely. I don't think, my cultural leanings are that hard to tell from reading this stuff, but I don't want to touch political stuff. Basically, I loathe them all, so it doesn't really matter. But anything with, it kind of a political hint to it just got nuked. It didn't do anything. But now I would sit there and say, you put something out there and sometimes it gets traction. I rant and rave about the government shutdowns all the time because I've been the victim of a government shutdown or two, because the VA doesn't pay and the government, when they shut down, I don't get paid by the government. So it's personal to me. And interestingly, some of those have done pretty well and gotten traction, and hard to say,
I think I don't know if it caught you off guard, but Peter shared with me a post he was planning on putting on LinkedIn, and involved like an image of his daughter's homework and something funny that she said about him.
I think you got a couple of 100,000 impressions on it. It's amazing.
It was so crazy. It went viral. Like, it honestly went viral. And
sometimes will. But yeah, that was one that was just like, wow.
And I think in Peter's case, it was a perfect combination of so many topics that social media loves already. Kids, kids' homework and unprofessionalism. But I also think there's a little bit of element of beginner's luck, because if I recall, that was his first post in a long time.
He does post, but not regularly. I'm the only one in the firm who I've tried to encourage them all to do it. And so far, I've not really gotten any takers. It's kind of funny. I do see out there lawyers I know who are sort of plainly imitating me on LinkedIn. It's really pretty funny to see. And I've had a few of those like that, but it's kind of random what gets that interest. But yeah, I laughed. I thought it was a great post. But I think people, one of my theories about this whole business of LinkedIn, I always sort of figured that some client I'm not going to get clients directly from LinkedIn, but I think if my name comes up, they're going to Google me and they could end up on LinkedIn. So I think if somebody's looking at that, what you want them to do is have some sense of who Brewster Rawls is. As I've sometimes put on here, like if I, just put up a post every day saying, hey, I'm a really great lawyer. I'm really good. Nobody's going to want to read it. I mean, it's going to, that will get no traction, but sometimes talking about other stuff, people to get some sense of who I am from that. My joke is that it's shameless self-promotion, and it is. I use my grandchildren. I'll use my dog. I'll throw my church in there. You name it. I'll put them all in the name of, promoting my business. So
that's something that entrepreneurs and marketers kind of intuitively do. They look for ways to leverage, things around them for marketing. And for something like LinkedIn or social media in general, you're literally leveraging your life and your life story because that's what people want to see. And I think like the people who are potentially imitating you on LinkedIn, to them, I'll say like, you can be good on any platform. It doesn't have to be LinkedIn. I know attorneys who have built their practice basically around being super popular on Facebook.
yeah.
And, that's where, you can reach clients directly in a lot of cases, but you're probably not going to be like an ace at all of them. But if you're really good at one of them, if you go to Brewster Rawls' LinkedIn and see like 50 people liked his last post, like that's really going to make an impression if you're potentially going to select an attorney.
Sure. And I mean, I think, and I've plainly sort of marketed the LinkedIn to a referral business. I mean, that's been my intent from day one, to refer me cases. We're the FTCA people. We do malpractice cases in Virginia. That's clearly kind of the message I'm trying to get across to it. And in that sense, I think it's been effective. Like I say,
we're coming up on time for the end of our show. So I'll ask you my traditional last two questions. Was there anything that we didn't talk about that you wanted to talk about?
Not really, but I would just sit here and say that, you're going to spend a huge amount of your time working at whatever it is you do, and you need to get some joy out of it. And if you're not getting joy out of it, you need to think about doing something else. That's not to say that every day is good. I've kind of taken the 60-40 view that if you're in a job, if you like it 6 days out of 10, you're probably doing pretty well. Even being a business owner, there's probably 2 or 3 days out of 10, I'd just as soon quit. But I think you've got to have that kind of sense of joy to it, and an engagement and mission. And if you don't have that, you need to find it, because I think all of us can turn into, you just have to stay alive, keep learning, keep being engaged. And on a bunch of levels, work is not the only one. But if you're not, if you get the worst thing I think that destroys people, eats their soul away, is boredom. They get bored, and that's deadly, absolutely deadly. Didn't mean to get philosophical on you. Sorry.
Oh, I mean, it is really true. Boredom is, I'll do anything to keep from getting bored. I'll give myself more responsibilities to keep from getting bored. That's a problem, but yeah, it's certainly not fun. Where do you want people to look you up and learn more about you?
Well, you can just Google Rawls Law Group, and you'll get to the website, which will give you lots of information. But probably if you want to know Brewster Rawls, look him up on LinkedIn. You'll know more than you never wanted to know about me then.
And a lot about his lovely puppy, Maggie. She's a Labrador, right? A golden? Yeah.
Labrador. Yeah, 14-year-old lab, which is old for a lab.
Usually mine's in here. She's a half foxhound, half lab. We just rescued her. It just turned out that was her DNA or whatever. And she's such a sweetie. I just love her so much. Thanks so much, Brewster. And thanks everyone for listening. We'll see you next time.